The sound of hoofbeats echoed through the darkening sky as Xerxes Valero urged his horse faster across the vast expanse of Utah territory. A storm brewing on the horizon that matched the one in his heart. It was 1878, and Parowan had been his refuge for 3 years now, a place where he could escape the ghosts of his past and the memories of the war that still haunted his dreams. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain as Xerxes approached his isolated cabin at the edge of town. His weather-worn face, tanned from years under the western sun, creased with concern as he spotted something unusual on his porch. Through the gathering dusk, he could make out a crumpled form against his door. What in tarnation? He muttered, slowing his horse and reaching instinctively for the revolver at his hip. As he drew closer, the shape took form: a woman, her dress spread around her like spilled ink, one hand clutching her swollen belly. Xerxes dismounted in a fluid motion, boots hitting the dirt as he rushed forward, caution giving way to alarm. "Madam, can you hear me?" He knelt beside her, noting her pale face and the sheen of sweat on her brow despite the cool evening air. Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. She was young, perhaps 25, with dark blonde hair escaping from what had once been an elegant arrangement. Her traveling clothes were expensive but soiled with dust, and what appeared to be blood around the hem of her dress. Most striking was her advanced pregnancy. She looked to be mere weeks from delivering. Thunder rumbled closer as Xerxes gently gathered the unconscious woman in his arms. She was lighter than he expected, despite her condition, and he carried her inside with little effort. His cabin was modest but tidy, the single room serving as both living and sleeping quarters. He laid her carefully on his bed and lit the oil lamps, casting a warm glow over her features. In the better light, he could see the fine quality of her garments and a small gold locket around her neck. This was no ordinary traveler who had lost her way. Her eyelids fluttered again, and this time they opened, revealing eyes the color of summer sage. Confusion and fear crossed her face as she tried to sit up. "Easy now," Xerxes said, his voice gentler than most would expect from a man of his stature. "You're safe here." "Where?" she began, then gasped, clutching her belly. "The baby, please. Don't you worry about that right now," Xerxes said, though in truth, the prospect of dealing with a woman in labor terrified him more than any gunslinger ever had. "What's your name, madam? Do you have family nearby I can fetch?" "Lydia," she whispered. "Lydia Blackwell." "My family." Her eyes widened with a flash of terror before she continued, "My brother, in Parowan, Nathan Blackwell, please, find him." Xerxes nodded, relief washing over him at the news that she wasn't completely alone in the world. "I'll ride into town and find him straight away." "You rest easy now." He quickly gathered supplies: water, clean cloths, and the few medical items he had on hand and placed them within her reach. Then he pulled a chair beside the bed. "Miss Blackwell, I'm Xerxes Valero. This is my home about 2 miles outside of Parowan. I found you collapsed on my porch." He hesitated. "Are you in labor? Should I fetch the midwife first?" Lydia shook her head weakly. "No, not yet, just exhausted and afraid." She reached out and gripped his hand with surprising strength. "Please find Nathan. Tell him I ran from Edward. He'll understand." The rain had started to fall in earnest, drumming against the roof of the cabin. Xerxes frowned at the weather but knew he couldn't delay. "I'll go now. Lock the door behind me, not that there's much trouble out here, but just to be safe." He grabbed his oilskin coat and hat, glancing back at the mysterious woman who had literally fallen at his doorstep. Something about her stirred protective instincts he thought had died with the rest of his emotions years ago. "I'll return as quickly as I can," he promised. The ride into Parowan was miserable, rain lashing at his face despite the protection of his hat. The small Mormon settlement was quieter than usual, most folks having sought shelter from the storm. Xerxes headed directly to the mercantile, which served as the hub of local information. Inside, he found George Harper sweeping the floor, preparing to close for the night. "Evening, Xerxes," the shopkeeper said, surprised. "Nasty night to be out." "Looking for a man named Nathan Blackwell," Xerxes said without preamble. "His sister's taken ill at my place." George's eyebrows rose. "Blackwell? New family in town, bought the old Peterson place about a month back. Decent folk, though they keep to themselves mostly." He pointed east. "Big white house with the green trim just past the church." Xerxes nodded his thanks and braved the storm once more. The Blackwell house was substantial, speaking of wealth that was uncommon in the frontier town. A warm light glowed from within as Xerxes tied his horse and approached the door. His knock was answered by a young maid who eyed him warily. "I need to speak with Nathan Blackwell," Xerxes said, water dripping from his coat onto the polished floor. "It's about his sister Lydia. It's urgent." The maid's eyes widened and she hurried away, returning moments later with a well-dressed man in his early 30s. Nathan Blackwell had the same shade of blonde hair as his sister, though his eyes were blue rather than green. "What about Lydia?" he demanded, tension evident in every line of his body. "Have you found her?" Xerxes removed his hat. "She collapsed on my doorstep about an hour ago." "She's conscious now but weak. Asked me to find you. Said to tell you she ran from Edward." Nathan's face paled, then hardened with determination. "Thank God she's alive. We've been searching for weeks." He turned to the maid. "Mary, fetch my coat and tell Thomas to ready the carriage." "A carriage won't make it to my place in this weather," Xerxes warned. "The road's likely washed out in places. Horses your best bet." Nathan nodded sharply. "Mary, tell Thomas to saddle 2 horses instead." He glanced at Xerxes. "She mentioned Edward. Did she say anything else?" "Just that you'd understand what it meant." Nathan's expression darkened. "I do indeed." He disappeared briefly, returning with a medical bag. "My wife is visiting family in Salt Lake City, but I have some medical training myself. Is my sister? Is the baby coming?" She said not yet, but she's in some discomfort. The 2 men rode back through the storm, Nathan pressing for details about his sister's condition while Xerxes tried to piece together the story from Nathan's worried comments. It seemed Lydia had been married to a wealthy businessman named Edward Brunswick from San Francisco, who had connections throughout the Western territories. The marriage had soured, with Edward revealing a cruel streak that had only worsened with Lydia's pregnancy. "She wrote to me 3 months ago," Nathan said as they navigated a particularly muddy stretch of road. "Said she feared for her life and the babies. I sent her money and instructions to come to us in Parowan. Then we received word she'd disappeared. Edward claimed she'd run off with another man." Xerxes said nothing, but his jaw tightened. He'd seen enough of the world to know what kind of man would drive a pregnant woman to flee across hundreds of miles of dangerous country. When they finally reached the cabin, Lydia had managed to sit up against the headboard. Her face brightened with relief at the sight of her brother. "Nathan," she cried, reaching for him. "You're really here." Nathan rushed to her side, embracing her carefully before examining her with practiced hands. "You gave us quite a scare, Liddy. How are you feeling? And the baby?" "Better now," she said, though her voice was weak. "The baby's been active, I think. I think we're both going to be fine." Xerxes hung back, suddenly feeling like an intruder in his own home. He busied himself building up the fire and putting coffee on to boil, giving the siblings some privacy to talk. As he worked, he caught fragments of their conversation: Edward's escalating abuse, Lydia's desperate escape on a stagecoach, her discovery that Edward's men were tracking her. She had abandoned the stage in Cedar City, using the last of her money to hire a local boy to drive her to Parowan. But the boy had gotten lost, eventually abandoning her near what turned out to be Xerxes' cabin when his wagon wheel broke. "I walked the last mile," Lydia was saying. "I saw the light from the cabin and was praying someone kind lived there when I must have fainted." Xerxes brought over 3 cups of strong coffee. "Lucky thing I came home when I did," he said. "Was planning to stay in town tonight." Nathan accepted a cup gratefully. "We're indebted to you, Mr. Valero." Xerxes shrugged off the thanks. "Just did what anyone would do." He looked at Lydia, who was watching him with those unusual green eyes. "Question is, what now? Storm's not letting up. Road back to town's getting worse by the minute." Nathan frowned, looking at his sister. "Can you travel, Liddy?" She shook her head. "I don't think so, not tonight." She looked apologetically at Xerxes. "I'm sorry to impose on your hospitality, Mr. Valero." "Xerxes," he corrected automatically, "and it's no imposition." He ran a hand through his damp hair. "You take the bed. Your brother and I can make do by the fire." As the night progressed, Lydia fell into an exhausted sleep while Nathan told Xerxes more about Edward Brunswick and his powerful connections. He's been searching for her relentlessly. Has friends in law enforcement across 3 states. Claims she's mentally unstable and needs to be returned to his care. Xerxes' expression hardened. "And the truth? The truth is he nearly killed her the last time he lost his temper," Nathan said quietly. "She has the scars to prove it. But he's a respected businessman with powerful friends. Her word against his wouldn't stand in most courts." He sighed heavily. "We thought we'd be safe here. Parowan's remote enough that news travels slowly. I never imagined he'd track her this far." "But he hasn't found her yet," Xerxes pointed out. "And now she's got you to protect her." Nathan looked troubled. "For how long, though? Edward won't stop looking, and once the baby comes—" He trailed off, the implications clear. Xerxes found himself strangely invested in Lydia's plight. Perhaps it was finding her so vulnerable on his doorstep, or maybe it was the quiet dignity she maintained despite her ordeal. Either way, he made a decision. "She can stay here," he said, "if she wants to. Few people come this way, and those who do mind their own business." It would give her time to recover, make plans. Nathan studied him thoughtfully. "That's a generous offer from a stranger, Mr. Valero." Xerxes met his gaze steadily. "I've seen what men like Edward Brunswick can do. I fought a war to help people be free. Doesn't sit right with me to turn away someone who needs help." He paused. "But it's her decision, of course." The storm raged through the night, but by morning had cleared to reveal a washed-out landscape bathed in crystal-clear light. Lydia awoke feeling stronger, though the dark circles beneath her eyes spoke of her exhaustion. Over a simple breakfast, Nathan relayed Xerxes' offer. Lydia's eyes widened in surprise, then filled with tears. "Why would you do that for someone you don't even know?" she asked Xerxes directly. He shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "Got plenty of room. Could use some company." He cleared his throat. "Just until you're well enough to travel or make other arrangements." Lydia exchanged a look with her brother. "Edward's men came to Parowan, didn't they?" When Nathan nodded reluctantly, she turned back to Xerxes. "You should know what you're offering, Mr. Valero. My husband is a dangerous man who believes I'm his property. Helping me could put you at risk." "Wouldn't be the first time I've been in danger," Xerxes replied calmly. "And it's Xerxes, like I said." A small smile touched her lips. "That's an unusual name. My mother had unusual tastes. She was a school teacher fond of ancient history." "It suits you," Lydia said softly. She looked down at her hands, then back up at him. "If you're certain, then yes. I would be grateful to stay until after the baby comes. I can't risk traveling again so close to my time." And so it was decided. Nathan would return to town, bringing supplies and necessary items from the Blackwell house. He would visit regularly but discreetly, to avoid drawing attention. Xerxes would provide shelter and protection for Lydia until the baby was born and she was strong enough to make more permanent plans. As Nathan prepared to leave, he took Xerxes aside. "I'm trusting you with my sister's life," he said, "and her reputation." Xerxes understood the unspoken concern. A single woman staying with an unmarried man, even in these circumstances, could lead to gossip that would damage Lydia further. "You have my word," Xerxes said simply. "She'll be safe here in every way." After Nathan departed, Lydia moved carefully around the cabin, examining her temporary home. It was Spartan but clean, with a few surprising touches: books stacked beside the bed, a hand-carved chest set on a small table, detailed sketches of horses pinned to one wall. "You draw?" she asked, studying the sketches. Xerxes nodded, self-conscious. "Helps pass the time in winter." "They're quite good." She turned to face him. "I don't know much about you, Xerxes Valero, yet I'm putting my life in your hands." "Not much to know," he said with a shrug. "Fought for the Union, came west after the war, raise horses now, do some tracking for the sheriff when needed." "Family?" "None living." Lydia nodded, as if confirming something to herself. "I should tell you about Edward, about what happened." She lowered herself carefully into a chair. "I don't want there to be secrets between us if I'm to stay here." And so she told him, as the morning sun climbed higher in the sky, of her whirlwind courtship with Edward Brunswick, the charming, successful businessman who had swept her off her feet in Boston 2 years earlier. How the charm had faded after the wedding, revealing a controlling, jealous man who saw her as another acquisition. How his temper had grown violent, especially after she became pregnant. How she'd realized he didn't want a child, didn't want anything that might compete for control over her. "The last time," she said, her voice growing quiet, "he threw me down the stairs. Said afterward it was an accident, that I had tripped. I knew then that he would eventually kill me and my baby with me." She touched her belly protectively. "So I wrote to Nathan, and when Edward went to Sacramento on business, I took what money I had hidden away and fled." Xerxes listened without interrupting, his face impassive save for a muscle working in his jaw. "I understand if you want to reconsider your offer," Lydia concluded. "Edward has connections everywhere. He's likely offering a reward for information about me." "My offer stands," Xerxes said firmly. "No man has the right to treat a woman that way, wife or no." He hesitated, then added, "I know something about surviving, Miss Blackwell. We'll get through this." "Lydia," she corrected with a small smile. "If I'm to call you Xerxes, you must call me Lydia." In the days that followed, they established an unexpectedly comfortable routine. Xerxes moved his bedroll to the lean-to beside the cabin where he kept his tack and tools, giving Lydia privacy within. During the days, he worked with his horses in the corral behind the cabin, occasionally riding out to check fence lines or hunt, always making sure Lydia had what she needed before he left. For her part, Lydia insisted on contributing what she could. Though her movements were limited by her advanced pregnancy, she took over meal preparation and kept the cabin tidy. She read from Xerxes' small collection of books and began mending clothes that he'd clearly neglected. Nathan visited every few days, bringing supplies, letters from their parents who had been informed of the situation, and news from town. There had been inquiries about Lydia, men asking questions at the stage stop, showing her photograph, but no direct confrontation yet. "Edward must know I would come to family," Lydia said worriedly after one such report. "It's only a matter of time before he connects Nathan to Parowan." "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Xerxes reassured her. "For now, you're safe here." As October gave way to November, bringing cooler temperatures. Lydia's time grew closer. The baby was active, often kicking so vigorously that Xerxes could see the movement beneath her dress as they sat by the fire in the evenings. One night, as the first snow fell outside, Lydia caught him watching her hand move in slow circles over her belly. "Would you like to feel?" she asked impulsively. "The baby's especially lively tonight." Xerxes looked startled, then tentatively extended his hand. Lydia guided it to the spot where the baby was kicking. His large, calloused hand looked strange against the fabric of her dress, but his touch was gentle. When the baby kicked against his palm, his eyes widened with wonder. "Strong little thing," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "Like its mother," Lydia replied with a smile. Xerxes looked up at her, their eyes meeting in the firelight. Something passed between them, an understanding, a connection that neither acknowledged aloud. He withdrew his hand, clearing his throat. "Nathan's bringing the midwife to meet you tomorrow," he said, changing the subject. "Mrs. Abernathy. She's delivered half the babies in the county from what I hear." Lydia nodded. "I'll be glad to meet her, though I hope she can be trusted with my secret. Nathan says she's reliable. And not much for gossip." The midwife, a sturdy woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and kind eyes, arrived with Nathan the next day. After examining Lydia, she pronounced both mother and baby healthy, estimating the birth would come within the next 2 weeks. "First babies sometimes take their time," she told Lydia, "but you're carrying low. Won't be too much longer." She glanced at Xerxes, who had excused himself during the examination but now hovered uncertainly near the door. "Mr. Valero, I'll need clean linens, hot water, and privacy when the time comes. Can you manage that?" "Yes, madam," he said seriously. "Whatever's needed." Mrs. Abernathy nodded approvingly. "Mr. Blackwell tells me there are complications regarding the father." She held up a hand when Lydia began to speak. "I don't need details. Your business is your own, but I want you to know that in my eyes a woman has the right to protect herself and her child. You'll get no judgment from me." Tears of relief filled Lydia's eyes. "Thank you." After the midwife and Nathan departed, promising to return quickly when summoned, Lydia found herself growing increasingly anxious. The reality of the birth of becoming a mother, alone save for the kindness of strangers, weighed heavily upon her. That evening she sat by the fire, attempting to sew baby clothes from fabric Nathan had brought, but her stitches were uneven as her hands trembled. Xerxes, noticing her distress, set aside the bridle he was mending. "What's troubling you?" he asked directly. Lydia looked up, momentarily startled by the question. Most men avoided discussions of feelings, especially those related to childbirth. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Not just of the birth, though that's part of it. I'm afraid of what comes after, of raising a child alone, of Edward finding us." She set down her sewing. "I have no home, no money of my own. Nathan has been generous, but I can't impose on him or you indefinitely." Xerxes considered her words. "When I came west," he said slowly, "I had nothing but my horse and the clothes on my back, worked ranch jobs, saved every penny. Now I've got this place, my horses." He gestured around them. "It's not much, but it's mine. You can build something too when you're ready." Lydia smiled faintly. "It's different for a woman alone, especially with a child." "Different, yes. Impossible, no." He leaned forward. "You escaped a man who wanted to destroy you. You crossed half the country while carrying a child. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Lydia." She blinked back tears at his words. "Thank you for that, and for everything you've done." "Just treating you the way any decent person would," he said, looking uncomfortable with her gratitude. "No," she said firmly. "Most men would have sent me to town with my brother that first night. You opened your home to a stranger, put yourself at risk. That's more than decency, Xerxes." That's kindness." He shifted in his chair, unused to such praise. "Well, truth be told, it's been nice having someone here. Gets quiet sometimes, just me and the horses." The simple admission touched Lydia deeply. In the weeks they had shared the cabin, she had come to appreciate Xerxes' quiet strength, his respect for her space and needs, the thoughtful gestures like the cradle he was secretly building in the lean-to, which she had discovered while looking for a broom. "It's been nice for me too," she said softly, feeling safe again. Their eyes met across the fire, and for a moment, something deeper than friendship flashed between them. But Xerxes looked away first, standing abruptly. "Should check on the horses before turning in," he said, reaching for his coat. "Storm's coming." After he left, Lydia placed a hand on her belly, feeling the baby shift beneath her palm. "What do you think, little one?" she whispered. "Is it foolish to feel this way about a man I barely know?" The baby kicked in response, and Lydia smiled despite her confusion. Whatever was growing between her and Xerxes would have to wait. For now, her child had to be her priority. The storm Xerxes predicted arrived with fury the next day, dumping heavy snow across the valley. The temperature plummeted, and Lydia was grateful for the sturdy cabin with its well-maintained fireplace. Xerxes spent the morning chopping extra firewood and checking his supplies, preparing for the possibility they might be snowed in for several days. By midday, the snow was falling so heavily that the corral was barely visible from the cabin window. Xerxes brought the horses into the small barn attached to the lean-to, ensuring they had plenty of feed and water. "Road to town will be impassable by nightfall," he told Lydia as he stamped snow from his boots. "Hope that baby of yours isn't planning to arrive until this passes." Lydia rubbed her back, which had been aching persistently all morning. "I've been telling it to stay put," she said with a forced smile. Xerxes gave her a sharp look. "You feeling all right?" "Just the usual discomforts," she assured him, though privately she wondered if the persistent backache might be the beginning of labor. She didn't want to worry him unnecessarily. They spent the afternoon playing chess, a game at which Lydia proved surprisingly skilled. "My father taught me," she explained after winning their second match. "He believed women should exercise their minds as well as men." "Smart man," Xerxes commented, resetting the pieces. "My father couldn't read nor write, but he knew the value of learning, made sure I went to school whenever possible, even if it meant doing his work and mine after." "What did he do?" "Blacksmith mainly, some farrier work." Xerxes moved a pawn to start their third game. "Died when I was 15, Spanish influenza." "I'm sorry," Lydia said softly. "My mother died when I was 12, childbirth." She immediately regretted her words as Xerxes' expression turned concerned. "It was her 8th pregnancy," she added quickly. "The doctor said her heart couldn't take the strain." "Still," Xerxes said, studying the board rather than meeting her eyes, "must be on your mind, given your situation." "Sometimes," Lydia admitted, "but Mrs. Abernathy says I'm healthy and the baby is positioned well." She moved her knight. "And unlike my mother, I'll stop at 1 or 2 children." Xerxes' eyebrows rose slightly at her forthrightness, but he nodded. "Sensible." As evening fell, the wind howled around the cabin, finding every crack and crevice. Despite the fire blazing in the hearth, the temperature inside dropped noticeably. Xerxes added extra blankets to Lydia's bed and insisted she take his heavy woolen coat as an additional layer. "What about you?" she protested. "Got my buffalo robe in the lean-to," he assured her. "Warm as a summer day under that thing." As Lydia prepared for bed, the ache in her back intensified, radiating around to her abdomen in a way that was unmistakable. She had been reading a book on childbirth that Mrs. Abernathy had loaned her and recognized the signs of early labor. She debated whether to tell Xerxes, knowing it would worry him, and that there was nothing to be done about summoning help until the storm passed. First babies often took their time, she reminded herself. By morning, the snow might have stopped and Nathan could bring the midwife. But as she lay in bed, the contractions grew stronger and more regular. By midnight, there was no denying that the baby was coming, storm or no storm. Gathering her courage, Lydia wrapped herself in a blanket and made her way to the cabin door. Opening it just enough to call out, she was met with a blast of frigid air and swirling snow. "Xerxes," she called, her voice nearly lost in the wind. For a moment, she feared he wouldn't hear her. Then the lean-to door opened and he appeared, pulling on his coat as he rushed toward the cabin. "What's wrong?" he asked as he ushered her back inside, concern evident on his face. "The baby," she said, wincing as another contraction began. "I think it's coming." Xerxes paled visibly, but his voice remained calm. "How long have you been having pains?" "Since this morning, but they were mild. They've been getting stronger for the past few hours." He guided her back to the bed, his expression determined despite the fear she could see in his eyes. "All right. No chance of getting to town in this weather. We'll manage here." He ran a hand through his hair. "I've helped birth foals and calves. Can't be that different, right?" Lydia couldn't help but laugh despite her discomfort. "I hope I'm a bit different from a mare, Xerxes." His face reddened. "You know what I mean. Point is, animals or people, babies come into the world the same basic way." "Mrs. Abernathy left instructions," Lydia said, gesturing to the book on the bedside table. "And supplies in that basket." Xerxes nodded, relief evident on his face. He flipped through the book quickly, then set about following the midwife's preparations, boiling water, gathering clean linens, and arranging the bed to give Lydia something to brace against. For the next several hours, as the storm raged outside, Xerxes proved himself an unexpectedly capable birth attendant. He supported Lydia through increasingly painful contractions, offering water, adjusting pillows, and reading from the midwife's book when uncertainty arose. "You're doing fine," he assured her repeatedly, though Lydia suspected he was trying to convince himself as much as her. By dawn, the contractions were coming rapidly, and Lydia knew she was nearing the final stage of labor. "Xerxes," she gasped between pains, "I need to push soon." He checked the book again, then positioned himself at the foot of the bed, maintaining as much of Lydia's modesty as the situation allowed. "Whenever you're ready," he said, his voice steady despite the flush on his cheeks. What followed was the most intense experience of Lydia's life, pain beyond anything she had imagined, mixed with a determination she hadn't known she possessed. Through it all, Xerxes remained a steady presence, his calm voice guiding her, his strong hands ready to receive her child. As the first light of day filtered through the snow-covered windows, Lydia gave a final, mighty push, and her baby slid into Xerxes' waiting hands. "It's a boy," he announced, his voice filled with wonder. "A perfect baby boy." The infant's lusty cry filled the cabin as Xerxes quickly wrapped him in a clean cloth and placed him on Lydia's chest. Tears streamed down her face as she gazed at her son for the first time, pink-faced, wrinkled, and utterly beautiful. "Hello, little one," she whispered, counting tiny fingers and toes. "Welcome to the world." Xerxes busied himself with the remaining tasks the midwife had outlined, his hands surprisingly gentle as he helped Lydia deliver the afterbirth and made sure she was comfortable. When everything was settled, he built up the fire and brought her fresh water and the broth he'd prepared the day before. "Thank you," Lydia said, cradling her nursing son. "I couldn't have done this without you." Xerxes shook his head, looking embarrassed but pleased. "You did all the hard work." "I just caught." Lydia smiled, exhausted but happier than she'd been in months. Would you like to hold him? Once he's finished eating, the look of panic that crossed Xerxes' face was comical. I don't know how to hold a baby, he's so small. You'll learn, Lydia assured him, just like I will. When the baby had nursed his fill and fallen asleep, Lydia carefully transferred him to Xerxes' arms, showing him how to support the tiny head. The contrast between the rough-hewn cowboy and the delicate newborn might have been amusing if it hadn't been so touching. Xerxes held the child as if he were made of the finest porcelain, his expression one of absolute awe. He needs a name, Lydia said softly, watching them together. Xerxes looked up. You haven't decided? I've been considering a few, but seeing him now. She hesitated. I'd like to name him Daniel after my father, and perhaps. She met Xerxes' eyes. Perhaps Xerxes for his middle name, to honor the man who helped bring him into the world. Xerxes looked stunned. You don't have to do that. I want to, Lydia said firmly. Daniel Xerxes Blackwell. It has a certain strength to it, don't you think? A smile slowly spread across Xerxes' face. It does at that. He looked down at the sleeping infant. Hello, Daniel Xerxes. You've got yourself one hell of a mother. The storm cleared the following day, leaving behind a landscape transformed by snow. Xerxes set out for town as soon as the road was passable, eager to bring Nathan and the midwife to check on Lydia and the baby. When they arrived, Mrs. Abernathy examined both mother and child, declaring them remarkably well given the circumstances. You did good work, Mr. Valero, she told Xerxes. Not many men would have kept their heads the way you did. Nathan, after holding his nephew for the first time, pulled Xerxes aside. I don't know how to thank you, he said earnestly, if anything had happened to Lydia or the baby. But it didn't, Xerxes said firmly. They're both fine. Yes, thanks to you. Nathan glanced toward the bed where Lydia was showing Mrs. Abernathy how well Daniel could nurse. I've been thinking about what comes next. Once Lydia is strong enough to travel, I believe we should consider moving them both to my parents' home in Boston. Edward has less influence there, and with our family connections, we could perhaps secure a divorce on grounds of cruelty. Xerxes felt an unexpected twist in his gut at the thought of Lydia and Daniel leaving, but he nodded. If that's what Lydia wants. I haven't discussed it with her yet, Nathan admitted. She's been through enough, but it seems the sensible course. That evening, after Nathan and the midwife had departed with promises to return in a few days, Xerxes found himself watching Lydia and Daniel with a strange sense of possessiveness. The cabin, which had always been merely a place to sleep, now felt like a home with their presence. As Daniel slept peacefully in the cradle Xerxes had completed just in time, Lydia joined Xerxes by the fire, moving carefully due to her still recovering body. Nathan thinks you should go to Boston, Xerxes said without preamble. Once you're well enough. Lydia looked up sharply. He told you that, said your family has connections there, could help you get free of Edward legally. Lydia was quiet for a long moment, watching the flames. It makes sense, I suppose, she finally said. Our parents would love to meet Daniel. And Edward's reach doesn't extend as far in the east. You'd be safer there, Xerxes agreed, though the words felt like stones in his mouth. Yes, Lydia said, still staring into the fire. Then, more softly, but I'm not sure I want to leave Utah. Xerxes looked at her, afraid to hope. No. She met his gaze. I've come to care for this place. The mountains, the valley, she hesitated. The people. Parowan's a good town, Xerxes said cautiously. Good folks, mostly. I wasn't talking about Parowan, Lydia's voice was barely above a whisper. I was talking about this cabin. About you. Xerxes felt his heart rate quicken. Lydia, I know it's too soon, she interrupted. I know I have no right to say such things. I'm still legally bound to another man and you never asked for any of this responsibility, but I need to be honest. She took a deep breath. These past weeks with you have shown me what a real man is: kind, respectful, honorable. The way you helped me through Daniel's birth. No one has ever cared for me that way." Xerxes struggled to find words. He had never been skilled at expressing feelings, preferring action to speech. But Lydia deserved the truth. "When you first came here," he began slowly, "I just wanted to help someone in trouble. But now—" He looked toward the cradle where Daniel slept. "Now I can't imagine this place without you, without both of you." Lydia's eyes filled with tears. "What are you saying, Xerxes?" "I'm saying I don't want you to go to Boston, or anywhere." He reached across the space between them, taking her hand in his. "I know it's complicated. I know there are obstacles, but if you wanted to stay, we could figure it out, together." A tear slipped down Lydia's cheek. "Edward won't let me go easily. He'll fight any divorce petition." "Then we'll fight back," Xerxes said firmly. "Nathan said there are grounds, evidence of his cruelty, and if legal means fail—" He trailed off, but his meaning was clear. "I won't put you in danger," Lydia protested. "I'm not afraid of Edward Brunswick or his hired men," Xerxes said. "I've faced worse." Lydia squeezed his hand. "I need time. To think, to plan. Daniel isn't even a week old." "Take all the time you need," Xerxes assured her. "I'm not going anywhere." The weeks that followed were a blur of new parenthood for Lydia and a strange, wonderful adjustment for Xerxes. Daniel proved to be a good-natured baby, nursing well and sleeping for increasingly longer stretches. Lydia recovered her strength gradually, taking short walks around the cabin with Xerxes' support, then longer ones as December turned to January. Nathan visited regularly, bringing news and supplies, but never pressing Lydia about future plans. Christmas was celebrated quietly at the cabin, with Nathan joining them for a simple meal and the exchange of modest gifts. Xerxes had carved a wooden horse for Daniel, while Lydia had knitted Xerxes a new scarf with wool Nathan had brought. In late January, as they sat by the fire after Daniel had been put to bed, Lydia finally broached the subject they had both been avoiding. "I received a letter from my parents today," she said. "Nathan brought it. They're overjoyed about Daniel and want to meet him." Xerxes nodded, trying to keep his expression neutral. Natural, they'd want to see their grandson. They've also been in contact with a lawyer in Boston who specializes in difficult divorce cases. Lydia hesitated. "They believe I have a strong case, especially if I'm willing to testify about the abuse." "Are you?" Xerxes asked gently. "Willing to testify?" Lydia nodded, her face set with determination. "Yes, for Daniel's sake if nothing else. He deserves to grow up free from Edward's shadow." She took a deep breath. "The lawyer believes I need to be in Boston for the proceedings. It could take months." Xerxes felt his heart sink, but he kept his voice steady. "When would you leave?" "That's what I wanted to discuss with you." Lydia moved to sit beside him, taking his hand in hers. "Xerxes, these past months have been the happiest of my life, despite everything. You've shown me kindness when I needed it most. You've helped me bring my son into the world. You've given us a home." "It's been my honor," Xerxes said simply. "What I'm trying to say is—" Lydia's eyes searched his face. "I don't want to go to Boston without you." Xerxes blinked in surprise. "You want me to come with you?" "Yes." She squeezed his hand. "I love you, Xerxes. I wasn't looking for love when I collapsed on your doorstep, but I found it all the same. And if you feel anything for me, for us, I do," Xerxes interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. "God help me, I do. Have since before Daniel was born." Lydia's face lit with joy. "Then come with us. Help me face this, and when it's over, when I'm free—" She faltered slightly. "If you still want me then." Xerxes pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she might disappear. "I'll want you then. I'll want you always." He drew back, framing her face with his hands. "But I need you to be sure, Lydia. I'm just a horse breeder with a small cabin and not much to my name." "You're the man who saved my life," she said fiercely. "The man who held my son in his first moments, the man I want to build a future with." She leaned forward, pressing her lips gently to his. "You're everything I need." The kiss deepened, months of unspoken feelings finally finding expression. When they parted, both were breathless. "I'll go to Boston," Xerxes said, "but my place is here in Utah. I've put down roots, built something that matters to me. Would you be willing to come back here after, to make a life in the West?" "Yes," Lydia said without hesitation. "This is where I found my strength again. Where Daniel was born. It feels right that it should be our home." In the cradle, Daniel stirred, making the small mewing sounds that preceded a full-blown cry for feeding. Lydia smiled apologetically and went to him, lifting him to her breast with practiced ease. Watching them, Xerxes felt a sense of rightness, of completion. "I'll speak to Nathan tomorrow," he said, "about arrangements for the journey and about my intentions toward you." Lydia looked up from Daniel's feeding. "Your intentions?" "To marry you," Xerxes said simply. "Once you're free to do so." Tears glittered in Lydia's eyes. "I would be honored to become your wife, Xerxes Valero." The journey to Boston was arduous, particularly with a 3-month-old baby, but they managed it with careful planning. Nathan accompanied them, providing support and introductions upon their arrival. Lydia's parents, while initially wary of the rough-hewn cowboy their daughter had brought home, quickly warmed to Xerxes when they saw his gentle care of both Lydia and Daniel. The legal battle was every bit as difficult as they had anticipated. Edward Brunswick fought the divorce petition with every resource at his disposal, including attempts to portray Lydia as mentally unstable and Xerxes as the man who had stolen her away. But Lydia stood firm. With Xerxes by her side, she testified about the abuse she had suffered, producing witnesses who had seen her injuries and correspondence from friends who had observed Edward's controlling behavior. Her parents' social standing provided access to influential figures in Boston society, many of whom had their own private concerns about Edward's character. The turning point came when one of Edward's former household staff came forward with evidence of his violence toward not only Lydia but previous mistresses as well. Faced with mounting evidence and increasing social scrutiny, Edward finally agreed to the divorce in exchange for discretion regarding the specific allegations. In August of 1879, 8 months after Daniel's birth, Lydia was granted her freedom. The following day, in a small ceremony in her parents' garden, she married Xerxes Valero with Daniel cradled in her mother's arms and Nathan standing as best man. "Are you ready to go home, Mrs. Valero?" Xerxes asked as they boarded the train that would begin their journey back west. Lydia leaned against his shoulder, watching the Boston skyline recede. "I've been ready since the day we left," she said. "Though I'll miss my parents." "They'll visit," Xerxes assured her. "Your father seemed quite taken with the idea of Western adventures." Lydia laughed. "Mother less so, but she'll come for Daniel's sake." They returned to Parowan in early autumn, the valley resplendent in fall colors. The cabin had been maintained in their absence by a local ranch hand Xerxes had hired, but it felt empty without their presence. "It needs a woman's touch again," Xerxes commented as they settled Daniel in his cradle. "And perhaps some expansion," Lydia suggested, looking around the single room. "Daniel will need his own space eventually, and maybe—" She placed a hand on her still flat stomach. "Maybe siblings." Xerxes' eyes widened. "Are you saying—" Lydia nodded, her face glowing. "The doctor in Boston confirmed it just before we left. We'll have another little one come spring." Xerxes whooped with joy, lifting Lydia off her feet and spinning her around the cabin until Daniel woke, startled by the commotion. As they soothed their son together, Lydia couldn't help but marvel at the journey that had brought her here. From the desperate woman who had collapsed on a stranger's doorstep to the confident wife and mother she was now, the transformation seemed almost miraculous. "What are you thinking about?" Xerxes asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "About fate," Lydia replied. "About how the worst day of my life led me to the best ones." Xerxes nodded, understanding perfectly. "Sometimes the darkest trails lead to the brightest clearings," he said, quoting an old cowboy saying. In the years that followed, the Valero homestead grew and flourished. Xerxes expanded the cabin into a proper house with separate bedrooms for their growing family. His horse-breeding business prospered, with Lydia contributing her own talents for organization and negotiation. Daniel was joined by a sister, Emma, born in the spring of 1880, and later by twin brothers James and Thomas in 1883. The children grew strong and healthy in the clean mountain air, learning to ride almost before they could walk. Edward Brunswick made one attempt to insert himself back into Lydia's life, sending men to Parowan in 1881 with offers of money in exchange for information about her whereabouts. But the town had closed ranks around the Valero family, and the men left empty-handed. Shortly afterward, news reached them that Edward had remarried and moved to Europe, seemingly having finally abandoned his pursuit. On the 10th anniversary of the day, Lydia had collapsed on Xerxes' doorstep. They hosted a celebration at their now substantial ranch. Friends from Parowan joined Nathan and his wife, along with Lydia's parents who had finally made the journey west to visit their grandchildren. As twilight fell, Xerxes found Lydia standing alone on the porch, watching their children play in the yard with their cousins and friends. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I was just thinking about that night," Lydia said, leaning back against his chest. "How terrified I was, how certain I was that Daniel and I would die alone." Xerxes tightened his embrace. "Instead, you found a home." "More than a home," Lydia corrected, turning in his arms to face him. "I found love. I found safety. I found the father my children deserved. And I found the family I never thought I'd have," Xerxes said softly. "That night changed everything for me too, Lydia." In the yard, Daniel, now 10 and the spitting image of his mother with her green eyes and determined chin, called out to them. "Pa, Ma, come see what Emma can do." Their daughter, a fearless 8-year-old with her father's dark hair and steady hands, was demonstrating a perfect handstand, much to the delight of her younger brothers and the other children. "We're coming," Lydia called back, taking Xerxes' hand. "Let's go see our daughter's latest feat of daring." As they joined their children, surrounded by friends and family in the home they had built together, both Lydia and Xerxes felt the same certainty. That sometimes the greatest blessings arrive in the most unexpected ways, even in the form of a desperate woman collapsing on a lonely cowboy's doorstep on a stormy night. And as the stars appeared in the clear Utah sky, Xerxes pulled Lydia close for a kiss that held the same promise as the first they had shared of love, of family, of a future built on trust and respect. A love story that had begun in crisis but would continue in joy for all the years to come.